In 2023, a young African leader stood before his people and declared something that shook the entire global financial system. His name Ibrahim Traoré. Copyright the revolutionary president of Burkina Faso, and his plan a gold-backed currency that could destroy France's decades-old control over Africa's money. Today, we're diving deep into how Ibrahim Traoré copyright gold currency just broke France's $500 billion monetary system, exposing a shocking colonial scheme that the West never wanted the world to see. Stay till the end, because what's happening right now in West Africa could change the global economy forever. At Macron Part 1 The Hidden Empire of France in Africa. To understand Traoré copyright move, we first need to understand the system he's fighting against, the CFA franc system. For over 75 years, 14 African countries including Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Senegal, and others have been using a currency that was not theirs. This currency, the CFA franc, was created by France in 1945, when Africa was still under colonial rule. France claimed it was meant to bring stability, but in reality, it was a financial chain that kept African nations under French control even after they gained political independence. Here's how it worked. Each CFA franc was tied to the French currency, first the franc, then later the euro. The value of African money was controlled in Paris, not in Africa. And most shocking of all, African countries were forced to deposit 50% of their foreign reserves in the French treasury. This meant, France literally held Africa's money, earning interest from it, while Africans remained poor. Every time Burkina Faso wanted to use its own reserves for schools, hospitals, or industries, it had to ask France for permission, and France would decide how much they could withdraw, like a parent giving pocket money to child. This system gave France access to over $500 billion worth of African wealth over the decades. It was a silent empire rebuilt not through armies, but through banks. Part 2 The rise of Ibrahim Traoré copyright. Then came Ibrahim Traoré copyright, a soldier in his 30s who refused to bow down. Born in 1988, Traoré copyright wasn't raised in palaces or political families. He was a man of the people, a soldier who rose through the ranks by sheer courage and patriotism. In September 2022, after seeing his country fall deeper into poverty and insecurity, Traoré copyright led a revolutionary coup. But this wasn't just another power grab. His message was clear: greater than Burkina Faso will never be a slave again, not to terrorism, and not to foreign powers. When he took power, Burkina Faso's economy was suffocating. Despite having massive gold reserves, the country remained poor, because gold profits were leaving Africa. Western companies and French banks controlled most of the mining industry, and most of the money never reached the people. Traoré copyright saw through the illusion. He knew that as long as Burkina Faso depended on France's CFA franc, it would never be free. So he decided to do the unthinkable, replace it with a gold-backed African currency. Part 3 The gold currency revolution. In early 2024, Ibrahim Traoré copyright announced that Burkina Faso, along with Niger and Mali, would work together to create a new regional currency, backed by gold, not by the euro. This was revolutionary. No more French treasury control. No more fake economic stability. This was real independence, powered by Africa's own natural resources. The plan was simple but powerful. 1. Collect gold reserves from national mines. 2. Store them within Africa under joint control of the Sahel Alliance nations. 3. Issue a new currency whose value comes directly from that gold. This meant every note printed would have real value, unlike the CFA franc, which was just paper linked to a foreign bank. And suddenly, a broken bar, the entire French financial system began to tremble. Because if these countries succeeded, others like Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Chad would follow, and that would collapse the CFA franc zone, cutting France off from hundreds of billions in trade and reserves. Part 4 France's $500 billion problem. Let's talk numbers. France's control over the CFA franc zone gave it access to around $500 billion in African reserves, either directly through deposits or indirectly through economic dominance. This money fueled French infrastructure, French companies, and even the French military presence in Africa. When the Sahel nations Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger decided to withdraw, France panicked. Suddenly, it wasn't just about losing influence, it was about losing money, a system that had quietly benefited France for decades. Western media began labeling Traoré tilde copyright as a dictator. International organizations tried to warn about economic instability, but African people knew the truth. They were watching a new Thomas Sankara rise from the ashes. As Ibrahim Traoré Part 5 at the war over resources, France didn't give up easily. After the fall of the CFA system in parts of West Africa, attention turned to gold and uranium. Burkina Faso has huge gold mines, and neighboring Niger has uranium, which powers 70% of France's nuclear electricity. When Niger kicked out French troops and stopped uranium exports, it hit France's energy sector hard. And when Traoré tilde copyright joined hands with Niger and Mali, forming the Alliance of Sahel States, the trio became unstoppable. Together, they controlled vast reserves of gold, uranium, and oil, enough to build their own self-sufficient economy. Their plan was to build an African financial system, one that no longer ran through Paris or Washington, but through Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey. And this wasn't just talk. Gold began to be traded locally, bypassing Western markets. Small African banks started rejecting the CFA and accepting gold or local currency instead. For France, this was a nightmare come true. At Y Broken Bar Part 6 at the new Economic Alliance. By mid-2024, Ibrahim Traoré tilde copyright, alongside Mali's Assimi Goïta tilde Macron Ta and Niger's Abderrahmane Chiani, announced the creation of a new economic bloc. The alliance tilde tats to Sahel is built on three pillars. 1. Gold-backed currency. 2. Joint defense and security. 3. Collective sovereignty. Their message to the world was clear: greater than we will no longer let foreigners decide our destiny. They started drafting frameworks for an African central bank, based not in Paris, but in Africa itself. The idea was to create a digital gold-backed system similar to a stablecoin, allowing trade between member countries without Western intermediaries. For the first time, Africa could trade its resources in its own money, not in dollars, euros, or CFA francs. At YN Part 7 the shockwave across Africa. The ripple effect was immediate. Countries like Senegal, Chad, and Ivory Coast, still tied to the CFA, began to question their dependence on France. African youth across the continent started chanting down with the CFA. In protests, social media exploded with praise for Traoré tilde copyright's bravery. He became a symbol of African resistance, the man who dared to challenge the French Empire. Even beyond Africa, countries like Russia, China, and Turkey expressed interest in trading with the Sahel bloc using gold or local currency, not the US dollar. This created a new global financial reality, where small African nations were suddenly setting the tone for monetary independence, and the world started paying attention. As Ibrahim Traoré Part 8 the battle for control. But power never leaves quietly. France and its Western allies began trying to destabilize the movement through sanctions, media propaganda, and attempts to isolate the Sahel countries diplomatically. But Traoré tilde copyright remained defiant. He openly rejected France's threats, expelled their ambassadors, and shut down foreign military bases. He famously said, "Greater than we will build our nation, even if we must do it with our bare hands." That line became legendary, printed on t-shirts, posters, and murals across Africa. YN Part 9 the economic miracle begins. Despite Western pressure, Burkina Faso's gold-backed model started showing real progress. The government began buying local gold directly from miners at fair prices, creating national reserves. This stopped the illegal smuggling that had previously sent billions abroad. Local businesses began trading using gold tokens and digital systems backed by state reserves. Inflation dropped, and confidence among citizens began to rise. For the first time, They were using money rooted in African soil, not in European banks. Even Mali and Niger began adopting similar frameworks, and suddenly, the dream of an independent African monetary system was no longer a dream, it was reality. Part 10. At the end of French monopoly, France's $500 billion African system is now crumbling. Without the CFA, without access to reserves, and without control of gold and uranium, France's economic grip is weakening every day. French companies are leaving. African governments are signing new deals with Russia, China, and the BRICS nations on their own terms. In 2025, the Sahel Alliance officially declared it would no longer recognize the CFA franc in any state transaction. That marked the official death of France's colonial currency system. And it all started with one man, Ibrahim Traoré, copyright A and a vision of gold. Part 11. Add a message to the world. Traoré copyright revolution isn't just about money. It's about freedom, dignity, and unity. For decades, Africa's story was written by outsiders. Now, young African leaders are taking the pen back. The gold currency represents more than economics. It's a symbol of rebirth, showing that true independence begins when you control your own wealth. As Traoré copyright said in one of his speeches, greater than if we keep our gold in our land, if we feed our people with our hands, then no empire can rule us again. That message is now echoing across Africa, from Dakar to Nairobi, from Lagos to Addis Ababa. Ending message. And that's how Ibrahim Traoré copyright gold currency broke France's $500 billion money system, not with war, not with violence, but with the power of economic truth. This is the story of a young soldier who challenged an empire and won. Because in the end, gold is more than metal. It's a symbol of value, strength, and independence. And for the first time in centuries, Africa's gold belongs to Africa again. At these negation closing lines, for YouTube narration. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep stories about Africa's revolution against global powers.